Hi everyone. On June 21st, the Holy Orthodox Church returns to the time of the Ottoman yoke of Orthodox Christians, sometimes called the Turkish yoke, the period when the Ottomans ruled over a large portion of the Orthodox population, which indeed they still do today. But in this case, the young man we're going to talk about had no idea of his Christian ancestry. In fact, he thought that he was a Muslim from birth. His name at birth was Niketas, but later on he found himself a Muslim named Mehmet. Now the reason for this was because on this particular island of Nisyros, where they lived, the father had gotten into some trouble. And because of this trouble that he was in fact he broke a local law, he was going to have to either pay a huge fine or be imprisoned for it. And so they offered him a way out of this, and that was, of course, to convert to Islam. Well, his father did this, as well as his mother. And so Mehmet was being raised in an environment where Islam was the predominant factor ruling their lives, although there were many, many Christians in the area. But then one day, Mehmet got into a fight with another young boy. And this young boy began calling him names like infidel. And Mehmet didn't understand why that was being done. But you see, the mother of the boy that was causing the trouble knew about the family history and was encouraging this young man to do these sorts of things. Well, Mehmet went home and he confronted his mother about it and said, "They're calling me all kinds of names, including infidel, and I don't understand why that is. What's going on?" And the mother fessed up and told Mehmet of their Christian ancestry and what had happened. Well, Mehmet was stunned by this, didn't know what to do, and so he asked, "Well, what was my name before? What is my Roman name?" Whereupon the mother said, Niketas. So Niketas had actually been baptized as a young child, but it was not long after that the family converted to Islam. Well, Niketas became obsessed with the faith of his ancestors. He wanted to re-explore his Christian roots, and so he got into a boat which took him to the island of Chios. Now this was maybe at the age of 15 or 16. And he got off the boat and didn't really know where he was going or what he was going to do. But as it happened, there was a monastery of Neomona nearby, and he went to that monastery and told the abbot there of what he had found out and what was going on. Well, the abbot catechized him, instructed him thoroughly in the faith, and received him back into the faith after hearing his confession. Well, Niketas at that point had developed a great love for not only his Christian ancestry, but for our Lord Jesus Christ as well. And he wanted to begin training for martyrdom, because one of the monks had said that if you renounce the faith, you must go back to the place of your renouncement, and you must confess Christ. Well, of course, in this particular day and age, that meant certain death if he did that. But he wanted to train for this. And so one day he found himself at the shore of Chios, and he ran into a priest monk there named Daniel who knew him, probably from way, way back, and said, "Mehmet, what are you doing here?" And when some of the local people heard this, they came to him, to Mehmet, and asked about a head tax, because the Muslims were taxing all Christians at that point, and he had to have proof that he had paid the tax. Well, of course, as a young man, he didn't have proof. And in fact, he said, well, talking to the priest Daniel, I'm not Mehmet, I'm Niketas, and I am a Christian. Well, the priest Daniel, of course, was astounded by this. It was news to him, but the people that were around Mehmet at the time pulled him in front of one of the local governors and said, "Would you like to repeat what you said? Because we were trying to assess whether or not there should be a tax imposed on you, because this other man, this Daniel, said that, you mean they're taxing Muslims now? So what exactly are you? And Niketas said, I am a Christian. And at that point, they started to try and induce him to come back to the Muslim faith with all the many things and material gifts and whatnot that they always seem to want to entice Christians to betray their faith with. But Niketas was having none of it. He didn't like that idea. He told them. He said, no, I am a Christian and I will die a Christian. Well, they took him and they beat him mercilessly. And then they tried to give him some food so he'd have more strength so they could beat him again. But instead, Niketas decided to pray and fast. So after this, they took him and threw him under a bunch of horses, hoping that they would trample him. But Niketas remained unharmed by the horses. Finally, they threw him into a dungeon for 10 days, still trying to convince him. And when they finally brought him out, and he was unconvinced, and said that he was still going to be a Christian, and that no matter what they did to him, and that he had a grace from above that they knew nothing about. This infuriated them all the more, until finally one of the soldiers there came up and took a sword and whacked his neck, chopping off his head, making sure that he could use as many strokes as possible to inflict as much pain as possible. Well, this young man made quite an impression among all those in that region at the time, and many of the Christians who witnessed this were actually praying that God would give Niketas enough strength to go through the martyrdom, because it meant so much to them for his testimony. And then, after they had killed him, they took his body and threw it away so that no relics would ever be found. But in fact, a few relics were found, and in this century there was actually a container found that contained his head that had been hidden for many, many years. So Niketas, the young boy of 15 or 16 years of age, witnessed to Christ in a way that really puts most of us to shame. He found the strength, after a brief catechism, of drawing on the grace that our Lord Jesus Christ offered in order to make his testimony and in order to persuade all of the Christians around him to also be strong. This happened in the year 1732. So in Orthodox time, it's like yesterday. It did not take long at all. But he joins the ranks of many of the new martyrs of the Ottoman yoke in praising our Lord Jesus Christ in paradise today. May we all find that sort of courage and strength in our daily walk with the Lord. Bye-bye.